Two People Exchanging Saliva is an absurdist, genre-blending live-action short film about a dystopian world where the currency for things is paid in slaps to the face, and kissing is a criminal offense punishable by death. If I had to describe this film in a single word, in one syllable, it would be wow. The film debuted at the Telluride Film Festival with the support of an Academy Award-winning director Barry Jenkins and its claimed grand jury and audience prizes during its festival run. And in early December, the iconic Isabelle Huppert joined as an executive producer. This 36-minute Oscar shortlisted film is the creation of two directors that come from the art world, Alexandre Singh, a visual artist, and Natalie Musteata, an art historian and a writer. I want to thank you both for taking the time to talk with me a little bit today.
Well, thank you so much. It's really, it's our pleasure.
Trust me, the pleasure is all mine. I have seen the film 4 times now. I love it so much. I can't get enough of it. I have so many questions that I want to talk to you about the story, the technical side of things. So we'll try to dive into as much as we can over the next hour. I do want to ask you first and foremost, though, what was the feeling like a couple of weeks ago when you found out that this film made the Oscars shortlist? Can you describe the feeling that you both had at that moment?
I mean, we were really ecstatic. We were with our team in Paris, and we had all gotten together. And the idea was like, if we're not on the short list, then we drink together and cry. If we are on the short list, we drink together and laugh. Either way, we drink together. But it was just we were so excited, especially because there were so many strong films, and we really could have imagined so many worlds in which, our film, a different list came together, and there were a lot of Friends films which we love that weren't on there. So we felt very, very lucky. And yeah, I mean, it was a surreal moment.
I think, do you remember our publicist sent a little text message saying we got in?
And
And everybody was like, what does that mean?
Well, we started cheering and then realized that we hadn't seen it with our own eyes, and that the text message was like a little bit too ambiguous. And so we had to see it for ourselves. And then, and then we saw it and we started cheering a second time. Meanwhile, one of our friends was outside on the street waiting to get into the building, and she was recording from outside, and she was like, why are they screaming twice? Is that good or bad? And so, it was just one of those life-changing moments.
Yes. Yeah, and very surprising and rewarding to us, because it's a French black and white absurdist film, as you say, in which people pay for things by being slapped in the face. It's a strange kind of arty film, and that it's gotten this far is really remarkable.
Yeah, it's also, but we made it with a lot of heart and a lot of tenderness and love towards the characters, and so I think that's one of the reasons why it's connecting with audiences, we think, hopefully.
Well, we live in this great world now too, where it feels like short films are taken much more seriously than they ever have been, and it feels like more people are getting involved in that format, and so the quality seems like it continues to increase year after year, and this film feels about as good as anything I've ever seen in the short form context, and so I am wildly impressed with it. My only request to people out there is I hope short films are made more accessible to people. I know this is on the New Yorker's YouTube channel, which is definitely like my go-to place to find them, but I just wish there was more access to short films, because there are so many incredible movies out there that unless you go to a film festival, it's hard to get your hands on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we were really happy to partner with the New Yorker, because we wanted the film to be readily accessible. We wanted people all over the world to be able to see it. And one of the reasons that we started making film, we come from the art world, which, that there's a lot of gatekeeping sometimes in the art world. And we wanted to make something that was for the audience and that was really as weird as it is, we feel like it's also something that's quite inviting and that, can be quite entertaining and fun, even though it's also heart-wrenching and unusual and dark.
It does cover the full spectrum of emotions that one will have in watching a film, absolutely. For people who might not be familiar with the two of you, would you mind just talking about how the two of you met and what led you to be inspired to want to create this thing together?
Yeah.
Well, I've been working as a contemporary visual artist for about 20 years, based in New York. And my work has always been in every single medium that you can imagine: drawing, sculpture, performance, installations, theatre plays, but always with a narrative element. And we met in
2009. And at the time, I was working at a biennial called Performa, which is dedicated to performance art. And Alex had a work in the biennial. And from the moment that we met, all we ever talked about was cinema. I even have the first conversation, like the first real conversation we ever had. I recorded it because I was writing about Alex's work. It's a 10-hour long conversation. And in it, we talk about everything from, Wes Anderson to Michael Haneke. And we really, like, from the beginning, just had the exact same vision of what we love about art and cinema in particular. And so once we're a couple, and once we decided to be together, we kind of from the very first moment started writing scripts on the side, like during the weekends when we weren't doing the things that gained us our livelihoods. And slowly over years, we read screenwriting books and film production books. And the second that someone gave us an opportunity to shoot something, we took it and ran with it. And so the film is quite elaborate because we just pushed it to its, extremes of what it could be. Asked for a lot more than was offered.
Well, we should explain that the film came about because the Galerie Lafayette department store started a program with our production company, Missia Films, during the pandemic, when they were inspired by the fact that these amazing locations were completely empty. And so they invited artists and musicians and performers to stage interventions or to make films during the night. So the program is called By Night. And they contacted us to ask if we had any ideas set in a department store, with the intent that it would be something that would be shot over maybe one night or two.
Yeah.
And we just thought, this is the most incredible location. We should set a narrative film in this building. But how could we take control of a space that already has its own codes and rituals? And what could be a way that we could make it our own?
And it was actually during our very first Zoom meeting about this, possible collaboration that we started throwing out ideas of how to subvert the space, which is, such a charged space in terms of like power and beauty and class and desire. And Alex threw out, what if it was set in a world in which people pay for things by being slapped in the face? And as you can imagine, there was a lot of sort of nervous laughter, but there was something very charged about this image, which came almost subconsciously, like it almost
took writing the film, shooting the film, editing the film, sharing the film with audiences to kind of be able to articulate verbally what that image conjured up.
At the same time, I think that we were writing like post the pandemic. There were a lot of things as like right now as well that were happening in the world that just felt quite surreal, and it felt like violence had been normalized, that every time I opened up my phone and looked at Instagram, that I was being fed some kind of really violent imagery. And so the idea that like violence was a form of payment that was so normalized in the society felt really apt to us. And then from there was in particular at the time there was the women's movement in Iran. And I don't know if you're following what's happening in Iran right now, but there are protests in the street as we speak against the government. And so none of this is ancient history. Like, we wrote this script several years ago, but everything that was happening then is still, still happening today.
Yeah.
And the women's movement in particular in Iran, and all of this violence against women who were taking off their hijabs, was also part of the inspiration for this world in which intimacy would not really exist, or at least would be punishable. And so we took it from there. we wrote very quickly. It was the fastest thing we've ever written. We wrote it in a few weeks. And after the first draft, it was greenlit. And we couldn't believe it because it's a pretty wild premise. And so even though
we wrote it in, we have a little group of fellow writers and screenwriters, and we meet every few months and we share drafts with one another. I've termed it the Right Club, the little play on words. And we shared, I think, the treatment with them.
Yeah, we shared an early version, and they were like, "We love it. This is so great, but no one is going to let you make this thing." Like, and so I pinched myself when everyone said yes, and up until we were shooting, even through the shoot, we had like representatives of the store come one night in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. to see what we were shooting, and it was we were shooting because we shot all the slaps on the same night, one after another. They're not real slaps.
Most of them.
Some are real. Yeah. There's certain angles you can't cheat. Yeah. But I was sure they were going to shut it down. Like they were going to come to their senses and be like, "This is crazy. What are we doing?" But no, I mean, they really gave us full artistic license and to this day are incredibly supportive. So we're really thankful that, especially in France, there's a lot of respect for the artist's vision.
Yeah, though at the same time, France is going through the same hard right populist growth that the United States is, and there's a lot. The hard right has said, for example, that they don't want the CNC, which is the French government's the French film funding body, to be so-called funded by the taxpayers, even though it's not actually funded by the taxpayers.
It's actually funded by the revenue from the films.
But there's it's an idyll, but even this idyll is under threat. You can't take anything for granted anymore.
Yeah, I find the inspiration for this movie so incredibly moving to me. I know you had mentioned in another interview, Ron DeSantis's "Don't Say Gay" bill was another influence, which is just another one of those things that we're facing this really tumultuous period in time. And I think there's a lot of stuff in this film that gives hope and optimism, even though there are some tough things through the plot, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. I'm also just so fascinated with the idea that you use the department store as its own character, really, because for people who might not know, that department store was once used for a different purpose. In the 1930s, I believe you had mentioned it was a bank, and so it has an architecture all of its own and sort of it's its own character in a way that settings aren't always, and it just fascinated me. How was it shooting in that location, and how much of a challenge was it from midnight to 6 a.m. trying to cram your entire shot list into that period of time? I can't imagine it was easy.
It was not, but we had an amazing team, and we also planned really heavily because we don't have a huge background in shooting films. Every scene was meticulously planned for.
And we did a pre-visualization, which involved scanning every single location with our phones using an app called Polycam, and then importing those 3D scans into Blender, and then blocking every single scene with little figures and placing the cameras to create a sort of very crude animated version of the film beforehand, which meant that we knew exactly where the camera would be almost always when we were in the store. And so we would wait for the store to shut and then rush in, try and set up like a few small lights, try and rearrange some of the clothing and some of the objects to kind of make the store feel like it belonged to the universe of the film. Then we would have to break for lunch at 3 a.m. And lunch is an hour, so we say 12 to 6, but actually
it's shorter.
Much smaller, yeah.
And then you'd have to finish shooting, and then you'd have to put everything back because the store is open 7 days a week. So even though we shot quite a few nights there, it was quite difficult, but it was also quite magical. It's a little bit like being in a museum where after hours, you have a very different relationship to all of the objects that are on display. It was kind of like night at the museum. No?
Yeah, a little bit.
For us.
but we were a small team and we were scuttling about. But we had planned very heavily so that on set we would have a plan, and then if inspiration struck, we could deviate from that plan, but we always knew there was like something to fall back on that was strong. And so there are certain scenes that are like a one-to-one replica of what we had designed, and then there are others that where we did allow a certain amount of improvisation. I mean, for instance, like one of our nights, we shot, I think, two of the most difficult things to shoot. One was like the makeup scene, which is a really intimate scene. And technically, it's not a difficult scene to shoot because it's so much in the close-ups, but it's such an emotional turning point in the film. And so it needed to land because you're not going to care about their love if you don't feel it in that moment. And then right after shooting that scene, we were shooting the incident, or what we call the incident, which is when this woman is tries to embrace someone and is apprehended, and it's a giant crowd scene. And there was a lot more improvisation. Like we had planned, we had an idea, but because you have like 40 extras, there's
40, 20. 15. We tried to make it look like
it was 40, but yeah, there's probably more like 15
extras. But that was a lot of extras for us.
Yeah, that's a lot of people to like manage, and to make sure that they're doing exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
And so there was just, for me, that was like a very difficult night, because we were combining these two very different things that were both equally important to the film.
We did play a lot with you mentioned the architecture of the store. We played a lot with creating very wide views to make it feel very imposing. We were very inspired by Bertolucci's The Conformist and those views of those fascistic buildings. We shot a lot into mirrors. As being a department store, there are a lot of mirrors. And we really liked the sense of voyeurism that a mirror creates, because it always doubles the depth. You're always looking at something and then again, and you have a feeling of yourself being observed. And so the camera in the story is very still. It pans, it tilts. There's the only sequence in which it moves actually in the entire film.
Yeah, it's very controlled because the world itself is controlled, and it's also the world of like Angine and Petulant, who are much more rigid. And then outside the store, we're always handheld, and it's much more the world of malaise. And it's also, by the way, we haven't mentioned that these are characters' names, and they all have absurd names in this world, that are reflections of their own characters and personas.
I'm so glad that you mentioned The Conformist, because I felt like I was pulling influence as I was watching it. Like, I bet they're pulling from here and there. And The Conformist immediately came to my mind when I was looking at the architecture, because for my money, that's about the best looking film that's ever been made, just in terms of the architecture and the work in the cinematography. And I could definitely tell your visual language was similar to what Bertolucci was going for there. So that's really interesting that you also were kind of drawing inspiration from that.
Actually, we were just discussing just now that there's a scene in The Conformist where he visits his professor, and his professor is describing to him Plato's cave, and he closes the shutters, leaving just a little sliver of light. And I think that was also an influence on the final scene in our film. And then, of course, the black and white dress was inspired by the iconic black and white dress in The Conformist, even though it went through quite an evolution in our film. At the very beginning, we thought, let's just
make a nod to The Conformist and replicate it.
But then our costume designer, Rezvan Farsijani, who's Iranian, said that it was a bit of a shame that the dress should mean something more than just a cinematic wink. And so she kind of challenged us to put a meaning or message into the dress, and
which is something that was very much for our team. It's not something that's evident to viewers watching the film, but because Zar Amir, who's the main actress and plays Angine, is also Iranian, and there are a lot of parallels. When we were writing the film, we were actually thinking about her at a certain point, because the film was inspired by the women's movement in Iran.
And Zara is also someone who's exiled from Iran because of intimacy.
Because of intimacy, there was an intimate tape of hers that was leaked by an ex-partner of hers, and she was put on trial in Iran, and she was, right before her sentencing, she fled the country, and she's been living in France in exile this whole time. And it's, I mean, obviously, if you're very familiar with her and her work, then you might know this, but it was very much like a sort of, for us, a hidden connection. Like, if you know, you know.
Kind of like, like when you paint, you put a sort of like an underlayer. There are a lot of underlayers of meaning that we put into the film, and then just allow them to sit there, and we don't draw the audience to it explicitly. We allow them to discover it for themselves. So if they know about Zara's backstory, that adds a layer of emotional poignancy and biography to the film.
Iranians who watch the film get it, and feel have a very strong response to the sort of repression and absurdity of the world, because there is so much absurdity in autocratic regimes. I mean, we see that in our own country, the more and more that we lean towards the right. But within the dress, to get back to the dress, our costume designer, Rizvan, decided that there should be a message in it. And the message is woman, life, freedom. And it's a message that is sort of inscribed.
This pattern of black and white squares taken from a visual art project that I had done originally, where I had created a language out of black and white squares.
Which is actually when we met in 2009.
Oh, and I gave you the book.
Yes, and so Alex had created...
Everything comes around. Yeah. It's all full circle. It's like making over.
Alex had created a language. Talk about esoteric. Alex had created a language in black and white squares. And so every word had an image, like a pictographic image of black and white squares that represented that word. So the dress itself says woman, life, freedom through the black and white squares. But
that kind of says a lot about our film, because our film is about this tension between the very esoteric, the very strange, making very strong choices in terms of the music, having a scene in which a character sprays perfume in her own eyes. But at the same time, it's also a film in which we treat all three of the characters very tenderly. We're very sympathetic to their point of view. We are... The camera can be cold and distant, but then an entire scene can take place just across the 20 centimeters of someone's face. And so in a sense, the film is about the tensions between those two things, which I'm going to write a little criticism here. In a sense, it's a little bit like the relationship between Angine and Malaise, or like that's what the tension is in this world, between sort of coldness and abstraction and formality, and then spontaneity and naivete and warmth. And then it's about where those two things rub up against one another.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just astounded at the amount of craft and time you to put into this film. There's so much nuance we've already touched upon a little bit, but I've heard you talk about the importance of mirrors in the film as a sort of a reflection and a surveillance of society. And there are all these layers that every time I go back to it, it's kind of like an onion. I peel away a little bit more each time that I go back to this film. And the thing that I continually I'm flabbergasted by is the specificity of the world building, which isn't always commonplace in a short film because you're condensing so much into that tiny space. But whether it's the garlic gum, putting on a glove to slap someone, the eating of the raw onion, smuggling toothpaste, there are so many layers to this film. How much time went into the conceptualization of this? Because this world feels so three-dimensional, so lived in, so meticulously crafted that it blows me away. How much thought process did the two of you have to all of these little details that are scattered throughout?
Well, in a sense, those little details are the thinking through of the consequences of these two rules, and then just applying how human beings, as individuals, but as a society, do the same thing. So if people weren't allowed to kiss and they were fearful of being kissed, what would they do? They would probably cultivate bad breath. They probably wouldn't brush their teeth. Toothpaste would become contraband.
Yeah, I mean, this film was not made strategically. We had a lot of fun with it, and so we just kind of just kept going. I mean, because there's two of us, also we're constantly ping ponging ideas. So we're like,
But that's great that you noticed the thing about the gloves, because that's cool. Every transaction involves gloves. The Malaise puts on a very beautiful white glove with rhinestones and sequences. When Malaise gets slapped in the little supermarket, it's just a nitrile glove, the kind of gloves you saw during the pandemic. Even the cab driver. She only has one glove, kind of like
Yeah.
Michael Jackson. And that
Yeah.
glove is a leather driving glove, which she uses.
Yeah.
Our idea behind that was that if you slap someone with your bare hand, then the money or the value would go to you directly. So the glove is kind of like the cash register. The value goes to whoever owns the glove. Never explained, not really, but just
Well, we wrote different versions of the script where we really explored the economy of the world, and we sort of have reasons for why are there these two rules? What, how does the economy work? And we really know the ins and outs of the world. But at the end of the day, we knew that what we wanted to do was to tell a story about three characters and three women in particular, and how they respond very differently to the absurdism of this world and the rules of the society. And so we ended up, being like, okay, well, we know this stuff, it's there, but what really matters is these three people, and it's their story. It's a love triangle. So we ended up, putting a lot of that to the side and focusing on
leaving it in the background, letting the viewer discover it if they want to. I think maybe...
I mean, like the garlic gum is there. I mean, there's a moment where someone offers some garlic gum, but we created like 200 pieces of little garlic gum with like 4 different designs, and they're in a shot for like a millisecond. But it was, we do really love world building, and coming from the visual arts, we sort of relish, production design, and we had an amazing team of HODs and all of their incredible teams to really build out that world.
Well, all of that world building is activated by how it affects the characters.
Yeah.
If it's just decoration in the background, then it's just decoration in the background. So all of those little details have to affect people's behavior. For example, in the film, people pay for things by being slapped in the face. Therefore, people who are wealthy get slapped a lot more and eventually have quite bruised faces, which they, rather than hiding, they actually kind of show off because it's evidence of their pecuniary power. Then people who are not as wealthy, there's a small scene after work where you see the workers from the store brushing on makeup to look as if they had bruises. And that is related to the human behavior, that people's aspirations.
The signifiers of wealth are always...
class is important in all societies in France, but also in America.
Yeah,
it was another just reference point that I kept coming back to time and time again. This film felt very much like a Yorgos Lanthimos film in that his movies are often like just a step away from what our reality is, but it's close enough to where you can see like a blending of reality with this very absurdist nature. And this film felt like it really kind of hit a home run in terms of the way I think Yorgos's films connect a lot with me. I'm also, and to tie it into Yorgos a little bit, I feel he uses music really well. The music is such a huge component to this film, and it changes through each act. I feel the original, the first act, the first chapter, it's very dissonant, it's discordant, it immediately kind of puts me off kilter a little bit, and then it sort of goes a little more whimsical when the relationship starts coming together, and then by the end it feels much more ominous, melancholy, and brooding, yet there's still like this kind of tenderness and hopefulness in it. How much, what was the thought process into creating the music that really has an ebb and a flow and has its own arc alongside the film?
Yeah, we thought a lot about the music, and we worked on it for a very long time. It was, I mean, we write to music, so there are certain pieces in the film that were, that were sort of designed to be in there, certain classical pieces. And then we worked, half the film is composed by a really amazing, actually half Iranian, half Mexican composer named Bobak Lotfipour, who is also just a wonderful human being. And so we worked really closely with him to sort of capture that like ominous tension and at the same time that tenderness.
We were very interested in using instrumentation in a discordant way, always making the instruments be very present. The score is, a lot of it is strings, but the parts in the instrument that you don't usually necessarily play. We definitely wanted the score to not just be underscore and undertones, but to be a character in itself. And then to sometimes we play Baroque pieces almost in counterpoint to what's happening on screen.
Yeah, I mean, I think we also thought about the film almost as a musical composition, so that like it has an arc, and it, you know, it sort of goes in waves. And
yeah, we think about the scenes almost like we always talk about writing and films as being like accordions, that every scene is either like drawing the accordion out to fill it with air and then like squeezing it down. So squeezing it down is time, pressure, action, and then lifting it out again. And so that happens with the characters' arcs, it happens with the rhythm of the scenes, and it also happens with how we use the music. Moments of quiet and simplicity, and then lots of notes.
Yeah. We also, I mean, we got really attached to this piece by Philip Glass from Mishima, and you know, it's not something we could afford, but our sound design, our sound
editor.
Well, no, our sound designer, Damien, who is someone I've known for a very long time and is way too talented to be working with us. He doesn't work on short films, but I've known him for like 20 years now. He recommended a music editor named Susanna Perich, who has been working on films since Silence of the Lambs. That's one of her first films that she did music editing on. And she's a legend, and she fell in love with our film and, you know, was like, I will work with you for you guys for free. I'm going to push, you know, I'm going to get whatever I can. And she had a relationship with the Philip Glass Foundation and just convinced them they should, you know, allow us to use this very famous piece of music in our film. Yeah. And so it's, you know, there was a lot of like, you know, I think that a lot of times if you just keep pushing forward, you can make really amazing things happen. And that's just what we did. We just kept pushing forward. So yeah, but it was a process for sure.
Did you two always envision this film being in black and white, or was color original and then you shifted to it? What led to it going in this direction? Because it feels very French New Wave, or I kept thinking of Lahane from the 90s. This had that sort of starkness and that boldness of color. Was that the intention originally?
The film, like the idea to make it in black and white was one of the first decisions we made. And there were both like artistic and practical reasons for that. I mean, there are a lot of black and white films that have deeply influenced us. We often talk about Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire,
Paul
Pawlowski's Ida and Cold War, as well as, I mean even Francis Ha, you know.
Or every single film until the 1950s.
Sure, but like we wouldn't say all of those are inspiration.
No, but there's also something to be said of when you draw a lot and you work very graphically, you learn to draw in black and white. You think about light and dark in black and white. When I do photography, and in black and white, it's such a seductive, simple, graphic way. It takes out all of the distracting elements.
Of the noise.
And when you're trying to tell a story and take a pre-existing Paris and a pre-existing store and make it your own, taking out the color gives a sort of uniformity to everything, and also kind of reveals what's actually there, because color often distracts. So you'll be, especially in a store, there'll be something bright magenta in the background, and instead you're drawn to the light on Melese's face. And it allows the characters to kind of like glow and makes this world sort of metallic, reflective, and especially as you said, it's a world of mirrors and surfaces and appearances. The black and white really helped with that.
Yeah. There was also something about like, it allowed us to go back to like the origins of the store to really like reinforce this geometry and the sort of like the grandeur of the architecture and the lines. Someone, you know, recently was like, this film is like boxes upon boxes upon boxes. Like you have boxes in the store, you have boxes inside the dress, and you have boxes inside the ravine. And there was something about just making everything, like clarifying the image. And then at the same time, we also just didn't have a lot of control over the store because we were shooting in the middle of the night. So this is a way of like sort of putting our visual.
There's not many people running around behind the camera. And so we couldn't visually control a store like that to give it a coherent color palette, and you would need not just a feature film, but a substantial feature film budget to be able to do that.
It's interesting that you pulled Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire, which I just recently rewatched a couple of days ago, which I love so much. And it sort of has the same thematic nature of there's a coldness and a foreboding to the environment that these characters are in.
Yeah.
And yet it also illuminates the things like the dress, for example. Your eyes are immediately magnetized towards the visual of that. So the black and white, I think, was definitely the right choice. It's so beautiful. It's so crisp. It's clean. But really the heart of the film is the three central characters, the dynamic between this love triangle. And I know you've talked about sort of how they each represent a different thing, a different facet of society. I'd like to start with Angine for a moment and ask you, in what ways does she act as a metaphor for today's society right now?
Well, I feel
That's
like
such a great question. Yeah.
I feel like Angine is all of us. She's the person who's comfortable, who is not suffering, who reads about things happening on the news and thinks that's terrible, and then writes a little message on Instagram or a heart. It's very she won't push herself outside of her comfort zone, and
or at least she hesitates a lot because she's fearful. She has, from the outside, her life is very comfortable, and she wants for nothing. She knows though that something is wrong, and she's a central character because she is actually at she's sort of at the in the center of these two opposing ways of being. Petulant is so rigid. She's so ingrained in the world. She's been following these rules for so long that she doesn't know any other way of life. And Melez is youthful and like so many of the protesters out, whether it's the protesters at Columbia or the protesters in Iran against the government, it's always the youth. And she sees a different way that things could be, and is not fearful. And so, for us, like these three different characters sort of represented. It's interesting how, like, with time, people become more conservative. Like a lot of times it's the older generation.
They start to understand what they can lose.
Well, I think that, I think fear plays a huge part in it. And also there's also a sort of mentality of like, well, this is the way that we experience things. So why should it be different for anyone else? There's a sort of like bitterness, I think, sometimes. I'm talking in generalities here. Obviously, like there are huge exceptions.
Is very much that. In the sense she's suffered, she's paid her dues. And if she she's not recompensed for having followed the rules, then what was the point? And so she will enforce those rules very rigidly, even though I think hopefully the audience understands that she is.
We have so much love for her.
She's fascinated by Melez and Angine's relationship, and it stirs up things in her that go beyond just professional jealousy to maybe also romantic or erotic longing.
Yeah, but she represses them.
Yeah.
But in a short, you can only do so much in terms of like between the world building and the character stories and who they are. At the moment we're working on a feature-length version, and all of these characters become much more complex because we have more time to sit with them and to understand who they are. And we certainly have as much love for our antagonists as we do for our protagonists.
Oh, I understand where she's coming from.
Yeah.
I can definitely confirm with the two of you. I have let people know I was doing this interview, and I have talked to people who have seen the film, and almost to a person, everybody that's gotten back to me with their feedback is they said, please tell Alexandre and Natalie, we have to have this as a feature film. So this is going to make a lot of people happy that this is going to be expanded upon. Have you already started sort of formulating those ideas for areas that you do want to expand or maybe add new elements to?
Yeah, we started writing the feature-length version in February. We were hoping to have a finished version by now, but come September, we became very, very busy.
It wasn't something we had planned. We made otherwise we wouldn't have made a 36-minute. We poured everything into this story, into these characters, with no ulterior motive, no idea about just...
we didn't even know if we were making the film for the art world, where we come from, or for the film world, or for film, it was during the edit. It was during the edit that some shorts distributors told us that it would be almost impossible for them to find a place for this film because above 30 minutes is kind of no man's land. You know, there's an expectation that shorts are either under 30 or you're a feature over 60, and anything in between is lost. And at the end of the day, we decided that we were just going to make the best thing that we could with what we had, and that hopefully it would find its place. And luckily that worked out for us.
So, which is to say that we started writing it because we love these characters so much, and we were very touched by the reaction that the film has had with audiences. And so it was around February after we won the audience award at Clermont-Ferrand that we started thinking seriously about the story and thinking about the through line of the story, because the film is on its surface a story about people being slapped in the face, and it's about a world in which you can't kiss, and it's about a dystopia. But really, it's a story about two women who meet, and one of them says, I know who you are. We've already met before, even though this isn't true. And it's actually that story of two people who don't know each other and then create a sort of fictional relationship between them. And
which becomes a real relationship.
Which is the sort of emotional, pulsing heart of the story, and that we're really thinking about as we're writing the feature film. It's what excites us emotionally, and hopefully, I think will resonate with audiences.
I mean, for us, a film is a success if there's an element of catharsis. It's the most important thing for us. It's what we love in cinema. I mean. There are certain films, whether it's Fellini's The Knights of Cabiria or Joachim Trier's Sentimental Value, where it just like,
Last Shots.
Where it just, both of those films, the last shots, they just really strike a chord. And that is one of the reasons that we love cinema, is that the ability to tell a very human story and a very universal story, no matter how unusual the circumstances are.
And to represent what you've been feeling. And the film represents a queer relationship, but the story is very much queer coded, in the sense it's about the repression of intimacy, but especially the repression of queer intimacy throughout history. And I think that that's kind of why we're making the film, to kind of like connect to an audience, to show that other people are feeling the same things that they're feeling.
Yeah, I mean, we often talk about the idea that like to tell someone not to love is like to tell them not to breathe. There's something that it's such an absurd idea, and intimacy, love is so irrepressible that it feels really cruel
and absurd.
Yeah, absurd.
Absurd.
Yeah, to tell someone not to feel those things or do those things. But it's also just it's a queer story, but it's also a universal story. Those characters could be any two characters, and yeah.
Well, and without giving away the ending, I don't want to ruin it for anyone that hasn't seen it. It doesn't have the happiest of endings. However, there is an incredible optimism to me in Malaise and the character that she represents. And to me, it mirrors in a lot of ways another film from 2025 that I think sort of looks to the next generation to inspire. And that's Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another, which very much centers on like multiple generations and what it means to fight against the system. And that movie ends in a spot where you're like, okay, this next generation is going to lead us into the future and push against all these things that we're fighting right now. And there's a line from your film that I took out, and it happens during the dinner scene. And I don't want to ruin anything for anyone, but it's someone at the dinner table says it's happening more and more. And I thought that little nugget in there, even though the film ends in one particular spot, that little nugget tells me the fire's still burning inside these people who are rebelling against the system. And so it's happening more and more is sort of going to be the thing that I channel into 2026, because I want people to continue to fight and to continue to push against the things that are being repressed in our society. And so what did it mean to you to have Malaise and have that character represent so much about the youth of our society today? Because I think it's important to show the next generation it is on their shoulders to push us in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Melez is a very interesting character because she does not change throughout the course of the film. She knows who she is, and she remains true to herself. And what she does is she changes the characters around her. And I do think that the film is hopeful, even though there's quite a bit of sadness in it as well. And that hope comes from the fact that she does change on Jean, and she affects her.
In a sense, every young person who is born is kind of like a viewer stepping into a Yorgos Lanthimos film, in the sense that they're like, what do you mean these are the rules of the world? What do you mean, like they kind of, or like that, that Buñuel, I think it's from The Phantom of Liberty, when they go to the party and everyone sits on toilets and then they eat food in hiding. Like, it's so many things in our world are like that, and young people are the ones who say, hey, this doesn't make sense. And then as you get older, you sort of accept it. And that's that kind of that regeneration is one of the beautiful and parts of the human experience, which is then paired with what it means to be a generation that is leaving, whose time is going. And it's kind of all of human experience rolled up into one there.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. The young generation and every person from every generation needs to resist the absurdities of this world, and certainly needs to fight, oppression in any way they can.
And she does it with a kind-heartedness, and that's what I love about Melez.
Yeah, she feels no animosity towards anyone, not even Petulant.
The other key element to this film is the narration, which I didn't pick up on her voice in the instant, but as soon as I looked, I was like, of course it was her. Vicky Krieps does the narration. She's extraordinary. She's one of our great actresses, whether it's Phantom Thread or anything else out there. How did you decide to bring her in as the narrator? And was there anything that her skill level brought to the process that maybe you weren't expecting? Like, what was that relationship like in terms of the narration of the film?
I mean, working with Vicky was such a dream. She is a wonderful human being, and for us, it was we had this desire to work with her, and we imagined her voice in writing the narration. And there was something about, I don't know how many people are familiar with her voice in French, but we knew that she was a French speaker.
But she's also from Luxembourg, and a little bit like our cast, Luana Bajrami, who plays Melez, is from Kosovo. Zara Mir is from Iran. It's a French film, but it's a French film that's populated by
a medley of people. It's a very international
cast. And there was we knew that she could have a sort of coolness, but also kind of like warm irony to her performance. And we recorded. We knew also that with a narrator, we may as well shoot for the stars, because it's a couple of hours work in a recording booth anywhere. We'll go to them. And we sent a letter to her agent, not expecting a reply.
And we didn't hear back for months. We were actually on the verge of giving up hope and being like, okay, well, what's a realistic, what's a realistic narrator that we could get? And then her husband watched our film through the link that he had received. And he loved it so much. And he said, Vicky, you need to see this. And not just see it, you need to do this. And so I think the next day we flew to Berlin and we recorded with her. And it was one of those things where she just understood. As we were recording, we took like an hour, like halfway through our recording, we took like a little coffee break, and she started talking to us about this script that she had started writing in her early 20s. And it was very much, a sort of high concept absurdist script that actually has a lot of parallels with the story with the script that we've been writing for a few months now. And we were just, there are moments in life where you meet other artists whose sensibility is very similar to yours. And we got lucky because we felt that, but we didn't know her. And so, it was one of those moments where things just really worked out.
I was very impressed with that young Vicky Krieps actress, in the sense that we don't give that much information about who the narrator is, and there's no such thing as an omniscient narrator who has no perspective on a story. even a godlike narrator would have a perspective on a story, because God seems to have a lot of opinions about human beings and what they get up to. So but within the small amount of clues and the ideas that we gave her, she was able to bring a lot of life and coloration, and offer many different options when we were recording her voice. And it's funny because when you hear Vicky talk publicly about her process as an actor, it's she.
There's a lot of intuition.
There's a lot of intuition. She's so much of the power of her performance comes from her sincerity as a human being, and yet, I think she's also a very great technical actor, but that's not often discussed. And I think when you work with her, you start to realize that there's obviously the power of her performance comes from her sincerity and who she is as a human being, but that doesn't mean that she has an incredible amount of craft.
Yeah.
And she brings real gravitas to the narration as well. It's just incredible. I want to take you out with one final question. I hope you don't mind this one. So I can tell the two of you are a wonderful pairing, great collaborators together. I just get the sense that you two enjoy being around each other and working. What's your favorite thing about the person sitting next to you that makes it a joy on set? Is there like a trait in the person that's next to you that you just love about their filmmaking style or what they bring to the process? Natalie, I'll ask you first.
Well, I have to apologize. I think I was a nightmare on this set. I was so nervous. But Alex and I are extremely complimentary, and I'm eternally grateful that, because he's a bit of a risk. He's more of a risk taker than I am, and which is not to say that everything isn't planned meticulously, but he is sort of like, we can do this. We don't need film school. We can just go make a film. And there was a lot of audacity in that. And I don't think I would have been able to do it by myself. So I'm really grateful that we're a really good team and that we kind of bring completely different things to the table, even though we have the exact same vision. So it's really remarkable because we're always moving towards the same goal. We just bring different ideas and different methods of doing it. And then, what would you say?
I would say that Natalie is has a lot of social energy and is very emotionally attuned to people. Because directing isn't just composing shots and doing VFX. A lot of it is about working with human beings and leading a team and keeping that team emotionally engaged. And Natalie is really, really good at this part of the filmmaking process, which is just as important, if not more, because you can't make films alone. And she also has a really good sense for casting. And Natalie's always telling me that she is the one who should have the final say on casting. Yeah.
I can imagine the brainstorming sessions between the two of you are just fantastic with the ideas bouncing, because this film very much feels like a true 50-50 representation of the two of you and what you have brought to the experience. I love Two People Exchanging Saliva so much. For anyone out there, the film can be seen right now for free on the New Yorker's YouTube channel. I have the links in the show note to this. Do me a favor. The moment you stop watching this or listening to this, go over to the New Yorker YouTube channel, check out the film. I promise you're not going to be disappointed. The Oscar nominations are going to be officially announced on January 22nd, and I just want to take a moment. I want to wish you two all the luck in the world when the time comes. I have a very good feeling that the two of you are going to be walking a red carpet in the spring.
Thank you so much. This is such a generous conversation. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I could have been here for hours talking to the two of you. I can tell you're real cinephiles and you just have so much passion and joy for the experience. This has been great. I want to thank everyone for checking out this interview. I am, of course, Andrew, and I cannot wait to see you next time.
Thank you.